Welcome to yet another episode of Paymob Talk. My name is Fawad Abdul Qadir. I'm the country manager for Paymob. Paymob is a financial service enabler, which is one of the fastest growing in the MENAP region. Today, we have a very special guest with us on this episode of Paymob Talks. She has been working extensively in the digital financial services space, working on micro lending and micropayments. She has made a very huge impact on this industry, on the fintech industry, and on the market. Welcome, Naureen, to Paymob Talks.
Thank you so much, Hyat. Thank you for that generous introduction. It's a pleasure being here today.
So, Naureen, how did it start for you? So, your early life, when we see your LinkedIn profile, it's all about starting from Bera University, but how was your childhood? Where did you grow up? Tell us more about who Naureen Hyat is.
So this is, I actually never intended to be in this space. All my life, I had grown with this dream of becoming a doctor. Very, very different from what I'm doing right now. But, for me, there was always this purpose of bringing some sort of impact. So much so that I actually got accepted into med school also. And so I actually grew up in Islamabad. So I'm actually going to share something personal, which I don't share a lot, but I think maybe, it can help a lot of other people who are, facing that in their lives. So when I was, very young, my brother was born much later to, when I was born. And he was born with a special condition called Down syndrome. And unfortunately, Pakistan, there's not much for people with special needs. For my parents, it was a huge, change, something that they were also not thinking about. But what, I wanted to be there, for them, because I think bada zaruri hai, support bahut zaruri hai, for families who are in that position. Mental support chahiye hoti hai aapko, otherwise family support chahiye, because your country is not conditioned to support people with special needs. So I decided that whichever university I joined, I wanted to be closer to them. I applied to the Punjab board. Us waqt, Khan, मैं कराची आना नहीं चाहती थी. उस वक्त दूर लगता था बहुत. So I'd done my A-levels, but I decided to, apply to the Punjab board. वहाँ top universities कोई, कराची में नहीं थी, लाहौर में ज़्यादातर थी, और इस्लामाबाद में थी. And फिर मैंने NUS भी apply किया, Army Medical College के through. But I actually did not get accepted in the first go. Because A-levels किया हुआ था, वो सारा FSC based होता है, तो आपको unfortunately वहाँ equivalence में आप मार खाते हैं. I applied again the next year, and I actually got accepted, but in Nishtar, which is Multan. That was like number 4 on, the Punjab medical jo board hota hai. So then I decided, I don't know whether this is going to be worth it. And I decided to just, skip medicine, and I joined Behra in Islamabad. Bachelor's मैंने किया, जो बिल्कुल एक complete dichotomy थी. But I did my bachelor's in finance, and it came very naturally. I think जब आप sciences करते हैं तो बहुत सारी चीजें आसान लगती हैं, because logic आना शुरू हो जाता है चीजों में. And I was fortunate that it came very naturally to me, and I did my bachelor's from Islamabad. And by that time, my family had also moved to Lahore. So I decided to, then take up my job in Lahore. And my first job was with the Pakistan Credit Rating Agency, but there are 2 in Pakistan, and I was a credit analyst for PACRA. Yeah, so that's how it started. And then, of course, there's a lot that happened there. Amongst other sectors, I was a specialist for the microfinance sector. I was actually very fortunate. वो impact वाली story यहाँ आनी शुरू हुई. मुझे पता ही नहीं था credit इतनी dry environment, एक credit rating agency में आपको एक impact के लिए एक opportunity मिलेगी. अब पाकिस्तान में ना microfinance sector शुरू हुआ था back in the 2000s. And it was created with the mandate to alleviate poverty. अब उस वक्त there were a few banks बने, जैसे तामीर बैंक बना उस वक्त, and then there was First Microfinance Bank, Khoshali आया. But fortunately, I had the chance to actually be an analyst for Tameer, and at that time Wasila, which is now Mobilink also, amongst other MFIs. बहुत criticism आता था उस वक्त, और अभी भी आता है कि the sector charges very high interest rates. But when you actually dwell deeper, you understand कि sector का कसूर नहीं है. They are actually serving the masses जिनको actually banks सोचते भी नहीं serve करने का. They're going to far-flung areas. It's very high operational cost जिनको incur करने पड़ते हैं. So वो उनको उनके models में translate होते हैं in high interests. High margins नहीं होते. But yeah, वो करते करते then Pakra में मेरे साथ हमजा होते थे, who is also my co-founder. And we thought कि what can be done कि हम operational efficiency ला सकें ताकि लोगों को इसका benefit transfer हो और हम interest rates किस तरह नीचे लाएं. That's when we actually came up with the idea of our first startup. Startup मुझे term काफी अजीब लगता है because that was never really the aim. Startup शुरू करना है, entrepreneur बनना है. This is अब ये बात हो रही 2013-14 की when we started conceiving the idea. There was this purpose that we had और हमें पता था उसको solve करना है. उस वक्त पाकिस्तान में entrepreneurship की तो बात भी नहीं होती थी. So then that's when we founded our first startup which was called Check-in Solutions और हमने एक digital field application बनाई to automate the entire credit disbursement process. So ना हमजा का experience था company शुरू करने का, ना मेरा था. हमने कहा कैसे करें इसको. So then Hamza went on to join an MFI and I went on to join an e-commerce startup at the time called Shopistan. वहाँ I learned a lot. पूरा दिन 9 से 6 weekdays पे हम अपने full time jobs कर रहे थे. काम के बाद और weekends पे हम check-in पे काम करते थे. But it became really difficult. कुछ साल डेट के बाद we were like this can't happen. We have to take the plunge. Or that's when we quit our the usual jobs and we decided to go full-fledged into check-in. Check-in पे हमने कोई 1.5-2 साल काम किया. There was a lot of interest that we got from the industry. But problem ये था, ये 2014-15 की बात है जब MFI जो थे वो regulate होना शुरू हो गए थे. उससे पहले they weren't regulated. So most of the MFIs were undergoing that transition process. And उस वक्त digital के लिए budgets ही नहीं होते थे. So we, that's when we actually approached Nadeem Sab. And he just exited Tamir then. So we messaged him, I sent him a message on LinkedIn. Hamza was like, respond nahi karenge. Dekh lo tum. But, he was kind enough to have responded within 10 minutes. And that's when, that's where the story of Tez actually started. He supported us a lot. He's, introduced us to the entire sector. Sector's interest bhi aata tha, but, the sector, I think we then were a little ahead of our times because no one was prepared to, embed themselves into digital. They did not have the budgets for it or the mindsets for it even. So, Nadeem Sahab ne kaha, if you guys want to do this, ye B2B nahi chalega. We have to show to the industry how to do it. And that's when, we joined hands to start Tez. And then Tez became the first fintech to get a license for digital lending. Well, digital lending ka koi license nahi hai, but we're the first fintech to get a license. So that's how it happened.
So when you are basically setting up something and you become a CEO of an organization at a very young age and people grow very quickly, how difficult it is for people to take you seriously and for you to go through that journey yourself?
So pehli baar, maybe I look younger than I am. It didn't, it took me a while. It took us a while, it wasn't a very quick journey. Maybe we were very fortunate, I'm so fortunate that we got a lot of respect in the industry for the work that we did, but there was a lot of time and effort that went into it. Of course, mushkil hua, but I think for me, I was fortunate to have had a team of co-founders who are very supportive. Well, I've actually confronted some episodes recently as well, and I think every day there's something new that one has to confront. But I think it's one thing that I've faced throughout with different people is the subtle art of being undermined. It's a lot of women usually face that. I think it's somehow perceived kiya jata hai industry mein ki shayad industry bhi nahi, it's not only Pakistan, globally ye hai. Maybe Pakistan mein zyada pronounced hai because it's a very patriarchal society hai. But it's believed that the man knows more than the woman does. Yeah. So wo wali cheez kai dafa mushkil hoti. For example, many meetings that I went to, Hamza and I were sitting together, used to be sitting together and still do, and kuch aisi cheezein hain jo meri domain hai, kuch aisi cheezein jo Hamza ki domain hai. And, if I'm talking about something, I know what I'm talking about, right? And people used to look at Hamza waiting for his validation ke ye sahi keh rahi hain, And I think Hamza को भी पता है कि I'm actually very very I'm very conscious about this कि it doesn't have to be this way. But I had his support as well. ये support आपको आइडियाज चाहिए होते हैं men में. But yeah, I think and there were times कई दफ़ा ऐसा हुआ कि we were taking interviews and there were men who were just looking at Hamza. I was like, I asked you the question, you can look at me and answer, I'm sorry that it might embarrass the other person, but there's some etiquettes also that I think till you don't make people realize that this is an issue, that status quo will always remain. Yeah. It's a tougher thing, but yeah, that's one thing I did. But I think I was fortunate. Women have to face a lot of other things that I did not have to. Unfortunately, harassment hoti hai, and there's a very, very fine line because men have the liberty to be friendly. Men have the liberty to be upset. Men have the liberty to, show their frustration. Women can't do either of them very openly. आप friendly होएंगे तो इसका character सही नहीं है. So you have to manage that. आप angry होएंगे तो she's throwing a tantrum. Frustration नहीं दिखा सकते. She doesn't know how to handle it. So those things one has to manage very smartly, and I tried. And there are days, when they're not the best days for me, but I've had to put in a lot of effort into controlling my reactions. But I guess that's unfair. But that is what it is.
Okay, so how do you define success? And are you there yet? Do you think you have achieved what you wanted to?
Success is a very, it's not an absolute term, it's very relative. But to be honest, a lot of people ask me that question. It's very tough for me to answer that because I don't think I'm there yet. I think for me, the success is that, I think we've opened an industry. I think I hope we have given a lot of other people who are looking into this industry the hope that this can be done. And maybe the push that they needed, that, things can happen and they can take the lead on it. So I think for me, that's one part of success. But in achieving what we need to achieve for Pakistan, I think we've just started to do that. The impact, I think success ye bhi ho sakta hai ki you're bringing in a change in even a single person's life. Yeah. And we've tried doing that for, many people, but I think there's a long way to go.
So that's an interesting way to look at it. If I were to ask you one person in your life who has made an impact and who you would like to thank today for making that impact in your life, who would that one person be?
This is very difficult. I think all the people who just mentioned, my parents and my co-founders, it's not one person. So I definitely would, of course, we take them for granted, our parents. It seems like it's a given. But absolutely, to them. And of course, my co-founders, it's both Nadeem Saab and Hamza. I don't think I could have managed to grow, the way I did without them. But I think one person I usually do not mention, and I don't want this to be a pageant, but, my grandfather, I've learned a lot from him, he's a surgeon, and he's taught me a lot about the important things in life. So I think, he's a very important figure in my life that, I don't talk about much, but yeah, my Nana.
Yeah. Coming back to your career in Tez. Now, Tez was ahead of its time. It was probably the first entity in Pakistan that was working on a certain segment which was completely neglected. What was the inspiration behind it? Like you said, you already mentioned regarding you guys thinking about that, but what did you want to achieve and were you able to achieve that with Tez?
So these are things that, everyone in the industry actually knows, but Pakistan mein dekhte hain, you talk about a corporate, you talk about a high net worth individual, वो एक बैंक के पास जाते हैं, उनको बड़ी आसानी से लोन मिल जाता है और बहुत अच्छे रेट्स पे. अब आप बात करते हैं उन लोगों की जो आपका एक एवरेज पाकिस्तानी है, जिसके पास अनफॉर्चुनेटली वो ज़राए नहीं है, जिसकी एक्चुअली ज़रूरत है, बैंक तो उसको देखता ही नहीं है. ठीक है, and even जो इदारे जो microfinance institutions who are serving them, well, they are unfortunately, deemed to help them in a way that is very expensive for them. And then, there's another, which is a much bigger informal economy. Wahan, these people are being served, but, you talk about loan sharks, for example, exorbitant rates. So, that's where the thought actually started coming. What's the fault of these people? जिनको ज़रूरत है, उन तक वो resources पहुंच नहीं रहे. How do we help them? This is where the need is. How do we bring that impact here? So I think it was very easy for us to understand what the need was. But of course, the question was, how do you help them? So Tez, for us, the vision was actually to be a bank on a phone for everyone. We wanted, access to financial services as easy as, till very recently, access to a mobile phone. The mobile is very महंगे हो गए. When we started, it was still easier to get a phone. Yeah. So that, that's how we started that vision. And the breakthrough that we brought in was, आप बैंक के पास जाते हैं, even, people who have a credit history or otherwise a banking transaction history, it takes them at least a month to get a credit card, if they do at all. Yeah. And if you, talk about microfinance institutions, they take about 2 weeks, at best 1 week, unless it's a collateralized loan. Tez actually, it brought in that innovation where we started giving in loans for new users in under 10 minutes from the comfort of your home with a phone. And for repeat users, it was anything under 2 minutes. So I think that was groundbreaking. We, the algorithms that we built and the tech that we built, it enabled us to, serve people in over 160 cities in Pakistan. So I think we tried doing, what we set out on, but of course, lending को scale करने के लिए, there's a lot more that goes into it. Tech और fundamentals very ज़रूरी हैं, but you need a consistent flow of an adequate, well, not adequate, but a huge amount of capital to serve the need that we have in Pakistan. So I think that's how that's what the vision was, and we started working on it, and I think we've managed to achieve some success in that.
What advice would you give to young graduates who are graduating right now for their careers?
So one thing I often tell to most of the students who come for advice also is always have a purpose in whatever you're doing. आप कोई भी जॉब कर सकते हैं, आप कोई भी कंपनी ज्वाइन कर सकते हैं, आप कोई भी स्टार्टअप शुरू कर सकते हैं, but at the end of the day, if you know what that purpose is, you can actually do it through any instrument or any company. Because I think कई दफा हो सकता है आपके पास वो purpose ना हो. So what the advice that I'll give is try finding that purpose. And when you find it, just follow it with full passion and perseverance. Because, कल को हो सकता है, you lose a job, unfortunately. हो सकता है, your startup fails. What failure बड़ा मुश्किल word है, but it doesn't do as well as you would want it to. If you have that purpose, you'll find a way to make it happen. And that's what happened with me also. मुझे काम नहीं लगता, because it's something that's so close to me. It comes in so innately. I enjoy every bit of it. But this time is really not easy to graduate also, given the the economic environment. Try to build your intellectual capital. If you don't have a job, try to take up courses online, बड़े मिल जाते हैं. Try to build your intellectual capital. There are opportunities for freelancing, remote jobs as well. Try looking for those, unless you find something in a space that you actually are fortunate with. So that would be my advice.
Finance is generally a dry field. So from what you're saying, interest in your work is very important, right? So how do you develop, and how would you advise Gen Z and the younger generation to actually develop interest in a field which is considered to be a dry? It's not as glamorous as a lot of other areas to work in. So how do you start to enjoy it?
I think it's a misconception, to be honest. Maybe accounting हो dry, but मुझे तो accounting भी काफी interesting लगती है. आपके interest पे depend करता है. If you talk about finance, there's so much to it, So I've done some CFA, some मैं किसी कहूँगी because मैंने तीसरा level नहीं दिया. CFA में मैंने बहुत सारी चीजें देखी finance में, जो there's so many avenues. So I think if you are in finance, actually finance हर एक company में आ सकती है. ज़रूरी नहीं है कि finance में आप सिर्फ, you talk about the logic of finance or the numbers of finance. Every company needs a finance department. And that finance can be linked to every business model. And every business model can be different. So I think if you find a purpose, you can actually, customize your financial needs or your financial, structures into any model. So I think ये कहना कि finance एक dry field है, अब ज़रूरी, maybe if you're getting into investment banking, that can also be a purpose, which can be purely finance. But, even something like digital lending or, even what you're doing with Paymob, आप finance को inculcate कर सकते हैं वहाँ, and there's much more impact that you can bring in. So I think that's how I would go about it.
AI is a buzzword right now, right? And even with the ChatGPT and the new versions of AI-based chatbots coming in and helping people in doing different tasks, there's a lot of talk about and scare about how the jobs would change and people would become obsolete and things like those. What's your opinion on that?
I come from the digital space, but in a lot of ways, I'm very conventional. Maybe not a lot of people know that about me. I think AI बहुत ज़रूरी है to supplement the processes and, the controls and systems. बहुत ज़रूरी है, बहुत help करता है. हमारा काम ही credit scoring में AI data driven रहा है. And maybe कुछ jobs में efficiencies because AI बेहतर लाता है, but वहाँ भी इंसान नहीं बनाना है वो AI at the end of the day, right? So I think the kind of jobs maybe that are going to be available, I think that shift is happening in the kind of skill set that's required. That doesn't mean कि इंसानों की ज़रूरत नहीं रहेगी. I think वो skill set change होना शुरू हो जाएंगे. But at the same time, I also feel that unfortunately life and the world is becoming really mechanical. We're losing our human touch. One thing that we really stress upon is high tech तो important है, but high touch बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है. So I feel कि अगली जो दुनिया की जो चीज़ हम वैल्यू करेंगे वो डेटा ड्रिवन या ये टेक नहीं होगा, वो ह्यूमन टच होगा, बिकॉज हम शायद इतना दूर जा चुके होंगे ह्यूमन टच से that we'll value that much more when we don't have it. So I think that's my take on it.
Interesting. With the skill set evolving and everything, there's a lot of debate on the pay parity that has to be in an organization. What is your opinion on it? And do you think that the pay parity in Pakistan is just?
बड़ा मुश्किल है because हम लोग, we go through this every day, especially when we are hiring. I think it's tough because we have people in our teams, who have conventional roles, and then there are people in our teams who have come in with, the new age role जो data की side पे हैं. Even within tech, there's so many evolutions that have come in. And, we see differences within, how the average salary brackets for the different skill sets are. But we try to, it's not easy, especially for global companies, it's even tougher. So we try to bring in that parity, but I think peaches with the startups coming in, I think there's been a lot of over promises. Promises is other, I think there's been, in a way, corrections that now have to be brought in because many of the pays that were promised by startups earlier on did not even make sense. I'm sorry for being so blunt about it, but I think it's also important to make sure that the people who are coming in, they're worth the value that they're bringing into the company. So I think वो चीज़ बड़ी ज़रूरी है. Unfortunately, one thing that I see with Pakistani talent is, and I won't say that for everyone, but we confront this when we're doing our hiring processes, is people feel that they, it's their right to have something. वो right आपको बनाना पड़ता है. आपको वो पहले दिन right नहीं होता कि आपको वो हर चीज़ मिलेगी. So you have to build that right. I've tried to build, something for me, but I don't have a right on everything on day one. So I think that we're very complacent as a nation, and I think that's with the talent as well. This is something that newer companies have to not only support but also train them to come to a point where they're worth that pay parity. Yeah. And I think organization का बहुत ज़रूरी role है in in investing in their human capital to bring them to a point where they're worth that pay parity.
Yeah. Just to add to what you're saying, it's also something that has to do with their being sustainable for them, right? Because if you hire someone on a very high salary and tomorrow you are not able to sustain as an organization and you lay them off, they go to another organization, do not get that same salary. Right? It's difficult for them to absorb it as well.
We've seen that now. We've already seen that happening.
Yeah. So coming to Zoot Pay now, you've been with Zoot Pay now for how long, and what are the plans of Zoot Pay in Pakistan? So, and please, if you could just give us a more in-depth knowledge of Zoot Pay as an organization.
Absolutely. So Tez actually got acquired last year, May 2022. That's when Zoot came into Pakistan. I was ahead of procedural formalities, mein time lag jata hai, but we started working on Zoot since last year. It's already been a year. I don't know how fast time flew. So Zoot is, well, technically the legal entity's name is Naureens Swiss. It's headquartered in Switzerland. And we are a digital lending platform for e-commerce. And when I say e-commerce, it does not mean that we are just a BNPL player, because a lot of people, they tend to just, think of us as a BNPL player. While we do BNPL, there's much more to it. So we have been functional in 5 markets, including Uzbekistan, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and now Pakistan. And, what Zoot has done, which is something that, I actually really admire, because we did not have this at Tez, is that Zoot has built a very strong ecosystem. So how Zoot is structured is that there are 3 pillars. The first one is e-commerce. Just Zoot has its own marketplace. It's a proprietary marketplace that's live in all the countries. We've got about 10 million users on the marketplace. It's called Zoot Mall. It's live on both Google and Play Store. Download it and give us a feedback on it. Then there's e-logistics. When I talk about e-logistics, it's a very asset-light model. We do not own the logistics, but we've entered into strategic partnerships with fulfillment players and last-mile providers, in which we provide the tech for logistics. So fulfillment, warehousing, 3PL, order management, all of that, we provide the tech, and our partners then, they embed themselves into it. So in Pakistan, we've got, our fulfillment partners, Neen Pro, which is managing fulfillment for us. And then both of these, e-commerce and e-logistics, have actually been built to support the lending piece or the fintech piece. And why? Because, at Tez, we learned that it's very important to have control over the user journey and the lending journey to manage risk.
What's the ambition for Zoot Pay in Pakistan 5 years from now?
So right now, Zoot is a digital lending platform for e-commerce. Our intention is to be a digital banking platform, where, we're serving, the much larger need of the ecosystem, not only lending, but, we understand from a sustainability point of view, there's much more that comes into the ecosystem, which includes payments, which includes, deposits. Otherwise, as you're aware, lending is not sustainable on equity alone. So, that's really the ultimate vision that we're trying to work on.
So how do you see the payment space, right? Because that's something that you work closely with. Entrants like Paymob or other payment fintechs that are working in Pakistan, what do you see them doing in the next few years? And if you could talk about the collaboration between Zoot Pay and Paymob.
Yes, absolutely. See, I think payments it's not an easy space to be in. And particularly with the new regulations coming in that are, curtailing the revenue models of payments, it's becoming even tougher now. And I'm not a payment specialist. I'm more of a lending specialist, but I understand, something about payment. I think in Pakistan and overall, what is very important for the markets that we're operating in is how the payments actually embeds into the infrastructure. So there's the acceptance side. How strong is the acceptance network? How easy are you making it for, the merchants and the consumers for acceptance points? And distribution is key, which Paymob, for example, is working on. Yeah. Distribution is not an easy, area to be in. It's time consumptive. It's costly. We've seen the likes of EasyPesa and Jazz invest, like crazy amounts of money and time into setting those distribution channels. But if we are to reach the masses, I'm not saying everyone has to do that. That's where partnerships come in. People like yourselves build that distribution network that other players then bank upon. That's one thing that I think players are now understanding. They don't have to own the infrastructure. They can actually ride on that infrastructure. So I think that's one thing. But I also feel, there are going to be a lot of collaborations in this space, because particularly with the EMIs that were encouraged, to come in, unfortunately, with the interchange now becoming being slashed, which a lot of banks are now talking to with the state bank, their revenue models have really been shook. So I think, understanding how those models are going to work and how you build value. See, I think payments is not it's not a high margin business. Payments is supposed to be considered, for me at least, as the infrastructure that you build on, where you can actually build on use cases on that payment infrastructure. So yeah, I think that's what we're also looking at. And with Paymob, we're looking at multiple things, where we're looking at how we bank on, your payment gateway, how we look into your merchant network, and, we then partner on the products that we're bringing in. So I think these collaborations, as I said, someone can build the infrastructure and then others can build use cases on that infrastructure, is how we should be looking at it.
I don't know if you've been asked this before, but this is probably the last question before we move to another segment of ours, is how do you want people to know Naureen Hyat?
That's a very tough one. I actually haven't thought about that. It's, one thing, of course, a lot of things you hear from, your elders and people around you, but you learn with time as well. You should not be remembered by who you are, but how you made people feel, I think whatever I do, I just want to leave a mark in people's life in making them feel better than they would have before they met me, I think, or what I'd done for them. It's a tough one.
Now, moving to our last segment, we call it, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Oh, my God, I'm sure I'm not.
So, let's see. So, what is the square root of 49?
7. Math, I know.
What is the past tense for the word cut?
Cut.
What does Wi-Fi stand for?
Wireless something. I know this. Wireless fidelity. Yeah?
Who painted Mona Lisa?
Leonardo. I don't know.
How many letters in the Urdu alphabet?
Oh my God, this is terrible. This is really bad. 26?
That's English.
I feel bad. This is embarrassing. How many? I don't know.
39.
This is terrible.
One place where you want to be hired, fired, and desire to work.
Where I am right now.
What?
Well,
hired?
That sounds tough. मैंने सोचा नहीं actually. Ever since I started my own, but the concept of hiring and firing has become a little alien to me. So actually haven't thought of it.
I'll put it differently. One place where you want to work. It's where you are.
Yeah, I think it's evolving. I'm happy with where I am. And it doesn't have to be a company, the name of the company, right? I think it's about what that company is doing for me.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be definitely somewhere in financial services and the digital space.
One place you don't want to work.
I'm not going to say it.
So that's it. I think you qualify as a smarter person than a fifth grader. So Naureen, thank you so much for being here with us. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me, Fawad. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you all for watching this episode of Paymob Talks. Please like, subscribe, and share our YouTube channel. And let us know who do you want to see next.